Hey guys, and welcome to another Warframe video where today we are diving back into the world of Eidolons, and this is a video that has been requested for some time, but I have been trying to figure out how best to present it. So today we are finally going to be doing a full guide from start, being a beginner with absolutely nothing, to finish, being an endgame Eidolon hunter. And we're going to separate this video out into several chapters, I hope. You should be able to see down below, and it's going to basically talk you through each stage of getting into Eidolon hunting, because I feel like the most difficult part about Eidolon hunting is actually gathering up the stuff you need to get into it. So that is what we are going to be running through today. So without further ado, let's hop straight into it. So the first time you encounter an Eidolon is when you first come to Cetus and you start doing some bounties and missions around here. But at that point you are actually unable to capture or kill Eidolons since you do not have access to your operator. In order to have access to your operator, which is this guy here, or in my case it's a drifter, you need to have completed the War Within quest. That will allow you to come in and out of your Warframe, swapping between your frame and your operator, who will have the ability to use an amp, which is the only weapon that is able to damage the Eidolon's shield. So although you can technically access your operator after the second dream quest, you can only use your amp on your operator once you've done the War Within. Now, in order to do the War Within, or in order to unlock it, you will need to be Mastery Rank 5, you will need to have completed the Sedna Junction on the star chart, and you will have needed to complete all the prerequisite quests, the second dream included, before you can do the War Within. So once you've completed the War Within, you want to head back over to Cetus and you want to make sure you have completed the Sire's Vigil quest. This is the quest line that allows you access to the Gara blueprints, but what it also does is it gains you access to the Quill's hidden cave after you have completed the War Within quest, and you are able to enter your operator, like so. If you head over to this corner in Cetus, you will find a cave just over here tucked behind the rock, and this will allow you to speak to Quill Onko. Once you've done this, he will then gift you a moat amp, which is the first amp that you are ever given in the game. So back in our orbiter now, if you come to the rear of your ship to the transference room, you should be able to handle all of the equipment that your operator has, and we can see here that we have a rank 0 moat amp to hand. Now you'll notice here on the right that we can't really do much with it, but we do have the option to guild to customize. When you guild an amp, either at Onko or Little Duck, as the tooltip suggests, you are able to improve the stats of that amp drastically, but we are not going to be worrying about that for now with this moat amp, as we are not going to be using it to fight the Eidolons, but we will use it to farm up some cores which drop from the Vomvalysts that spawn naturally in the plains of Eidolon. So we now come to our first build in this video. Now this is going to be aimed at taking out Vomvalysts only. We're not going to be looking at Eidolons at this time. I just want to note here as well, a quick disclaimer. At this point in the game, I am Legendary 3. I have quote-unquote completed the game at this stage. I have everything that the game has to offer, really. That includes a maxed out focus tree, which I unfortunately cannot switch off for the benefit of this video and showing you what it would be like if I had no focus schools maxed out. What I have done instead to try and counter this is I have gone for a skill tree that is not really going to benefit me for the types of missions and the type of gameplay that you're going to be seeing. So hopefully it will roughly mimic what you guys are going to be experiencing as we go through. So that's the first thing to bear in mind. The second thing is, whilst you may have access to Railjack intrinsics at this point, you probably won't have them maxed out. You can access your Railjack intrinsics from the menu, or if you have access to a dry dock and a Railjack, you can go there and alter your intrinsics there. In terms of our intrinsics, they are only really going to be benefiting our Railjack movement and mobility, so it shouldn't really affect what you're seeing all that much, but it is something to note. The last and final thing you should note is that Duviri intrinsics, which came out in one of the more recent updates, also affect our operator in that they will provide us with a slight damage boost. If you don't have access to the Duviri intrinsics, then unfortunately you won't be able to get this boost and you might deal slightly less damage than me, but overall it shouldn't be too much of a hindrance. So let's just have a quick look at our build here that we're going to be using for fighting Vomvalysts only. First of all, I'm going to assume that you might have started with Volt. If you haven't started with Vault, you can get his blueprint component parts in any clan dojo's Tenno lab. That's something to note. If we take a look at our Vault here, you'll notice as well that it is a Vault Prime. This is not going to affect how our abilities work at all, which is all we are interested in. So if you just have normal Vault, it will work just as effectively. You will just have slightly less health, shield, and energy. It shouldn't really hinder you all that much. If we take a look at the mods I've put on here, it's going to assume a few things that you've got up to this point in the game. First of all, you want to have an aura mod. It doesn't really matter which one you have on. I've just gone for corrosive projection here, but there are various others that you can stick on, such as Deadeye, Sprint Boost, Enemy Radar, Holster Ramp, or Steel Charge, in order to improve the capacity of your build, as well as provide you with, in my case, an armor reduction to enemy units, which is quite nice. Then I've just thrown on 3 basic mods which you may have picked up during the course of gameplay: Vitality, Continuity, and Streamline. I've also gone with a MR2 weapon, the normal Vectis, and I haven't put an Orokin Catalyst on this. We have Amalgam Serration, but this can easily be subbed out for just normal Serration. In fact, it actually does more damage, normal Serration over Amalgam Serration, but the sprint speed is going to allow us to move around a bit faster. Then you want to be able to combine 2 elemental mods to create Radiation. Radiation is the best element damage type against sentient units, which is why we are running it. So Hellfire and Stormbringer are going to provide that for us, and luckily the Vectis comes with a Y polarity slot right here, which allows us to fit on these mods exactly under 30 capacity, although if you are running normal Serration you will have 1 left over. So without further ado, let's hop into the plains and I will show you kind of the best ways you can roam around and hunt for Vomvalysts. Okay guys, so in order to farm up our Vomvalysts, we're going to enter the plains of Eidolon at night. Vomvalysts will only spawn during the night time, so don't bother looking for them during the day. As soon as we come out of the gate here, I'm going to hop into my Archwing and I'm going to hover forward just over these 2 bones here to about this point. Now there are 2 spots which I'm going to be looking at for Vomvalysts. The first one is over here. The second one is over here on this mountainside, and what I'm basically going to do is I'm going to hover between these 2 points and be on the lookout for little blue puffs of smoke, which are going to indicate when Vomvalysts have spawned. So if we quickly just kind of glide in this way, there we go, we got 2 Vomvalysts spawned just there. Now, we're going to come down, and first of all we're going to use our Vectis to pop the Vomvalysts. We can use our shield in order to improve the damage. Like so. They're going to fly at us, but we should be fine. And then we can come into our operator, and using our moat amp we can go ahead and take them out and pick up the intact sentient cores. Now each of these sentient cores is going to provide us with 250 standing with Quill Onco. So 500 for every pair of Vomvalysts that we get. So if we keep going backwards and forwards like this, let's just hover back over here. There we go, 2 more. Once again, let's pop them. And then use our operator. We can pick up the cores. That's another 500 we just picked up there. So we're up to 1,000 standing already, just in the space of basically under a minute. And I've been talking as we've done that. So let's go ahead and hop over to Quill Onco and take a look at how many of these we're actually going to need before we can progress to the next stage. So over in Quill Onco's shop, we can see that there are a few amp parts scattered throughout. Now, we are only going to be focusing on the first 2 tiers of amp parts, those being the Replac Prism, the Pencha Scaffold, Klapka Brace, tier 1, and then the Schwark Prism, the Shraxon Scaffold, and the Jutney Brace, tier 2. We are not going to bother with anything else in this shop because we are going to be moving over to Little Duck when we come to create our next amp. So, the parts that you are going to want to collect from this shop are the Replac Prism and the Klapka Brace, one of which you will be able to get for free when you rank up from neutral to rank 1 with the quills. And then we are going to rank up again and get our hands on the Shraxon Scaffold. The reason that we are going to be getting the Klapka Brace and not the Jutney Brace is because we want to fire more shots rather than shots quickly, because at this stage our amp is not going to be doing a whole lot of damage, and we actually want to be able to fire enough amp shots off to take down the shield. So bear that in mind when you come to build your amp. But the 3 parts again that we're going to be getting: Replac Prism, Klapka Brace, and Shraxon Scaffold. Now in order to get to this point, we are obviously going to have to rank up to Observer with the quills, which is rank 2, and in order to get there we are going to need a decent amount of intact sentient cores to get there. In fact, we are going to need a grand total of 284 in order to get to this point. If we take a look at the Replac Prism, which we are going to assume we're going to get free on the first rank, that's going to cost us 4 intact sentient cores. The Klapka Brace, exactly the same amount, so on the first rank we are going to need an extra 4 for that. And then for the Shraxon Scaffold, we're going to need an extra 6. So add on another 10, and you get to 294 intact sentient cores that you will require in total to get to this point. If we take a look at the Trade Sentient Cores for Quill Standing tab, we can see that there are a number of different cores we can trade in, and we also have 2 extra items at the top here: Nama Isoplasts and Universal Medallions. Universal Medallions drop very infrequently and unreliably from missions in the normal star chart, including Disruption. I would not recommend at all farming these. It is not a good way to rank up with various syndicates. Nama Isoplasts, on the other hand, are very easy to farm. However, you will need to have completed the new war quest before you can access the Nama bounties from Konzu on Cetus. These trade in for 2,000 standing each, making them a much better option than trading in intact sentient cores, and to be honest, it is way more grindy getting the sentient cores than it is the Nama Isoplast. So if you do want to continue on past the new war, or sorry, the war within, to get to the new war, then you will have a better opportunity to farm these syndicates much faster using Nama Isoplasts. These can be used as well for farming up standing with Little Duck on Fortuna, which you do want to be doing alongside this as well, as we are going to be needing to collect the amp parts from her in the future to create our next amp. So alongside doing all of the Cetus stuff that we have been talking about, you will have hopefully also encountered Fortuna as well and began ranking yourself up with Solaris United. Once you get to rank 5 with Solaris United, you will be able to access Little Duck's shop in the corner of Fortuna. If we take a look through here, you can see that she also offers a number of amp parts, but for the moment, we are just going to ignore these. I only wanted to raise it, since you should know that you should be farming up standing for Little Duck alongside doing this, as we are going to want to buy some of her equipment when we come to build our next amp. Alright guys, so our amp is now constructed. Here we can see Replac Prism, Shraxon Scaffold, and Klapka Brace. But if we take a look through the stats here, we can see they're not great, and what we want to do before we actually get into an Eidolon hunt is we want to guild this amp so that we are dealing the maximum possible damage and not getting frustrated at how long it's taking us to take down the shields. What I would also point out here is that if you have completed the new war at this point, you will have access to the Sirocco, which you get given for free after the new war finishes. This is an entirely viable alternative, and an even better alternative, to be honest, than this amp that I would recommend to starters when they're getting into Eidolon hunts. It has an exceptionally high crit chance, as well as an increased damage boost if you reload the weapon correctly. If you want to know more about it, you can look up the Sirocco on the wiki, or try it out in game to understand how it works mechanically. But without further ado, let's get this amp maxed out. You can do this on any of the usual spots such as ESO, Hydron, or you can even do it on Adaro. So our amp is now rank 30, and we can come back to Quill Onco and go ahead and guild our weapon. In other services, you are going to need another 5,000 standing, so 20 intact sentient cores to do this. And we'll just name this Starter Amp. And there we go, our amp now has improved stats. Before we get into our Eidolon hunting though, there is one more thing we need to do, and that is sort out a weapon. When it comes to early game Eidolon hunting, I tend to refer people to the Rubico. It is a very good weapon for taking out Eidolons for a few reasons. Firstly, it can pack a serious amount of damage into a single shot. It also has a high crit chance and a high crit damage multiplier. These are all traits of a good Eidolon hunting weapon. If you do happen to have access to the Rubico Prime, by all means please use that, as it is a direct upgrade to this weapon, but the normal Rubico can be acquired at MR6, which, when we consider that we need to be MR5 to do the War Within, it is a very short step up to acquiring this weapon. So let's take a look at the build here and we'll run through it. So we've got a normal Serration on. You can have this at level 7 or even level 8. It wouldn't matter too much, but obviously the higher rank you get it, the faster the fight will be. We also have a Split Chamber on and a Vital Sense. Both of these mods can be acquired through puzzle rooms in Void missions, and these basically are just going to directly increase our damage, with Vital Sense giving us extra crit multiplier, and Split Chamber giving us a 90% chance to fire another shot, which is actually very important for sniper rifles. We also have Critical Delay on. This mod can be acquired through doing vaults on Deimos, the Orokin vaults, and you have a chance to acquire this out of, I think we're up at around, it's getting close to 20 mods now, so this isn't an easy one to farm per se. You can get lucky and get it early on, but if you don't happen to have this mod or you don't want to farm it up, you can sub it in for Point Strike, but again, you will take a hit on the amount of time it takes to fight, as your crit chance will be seriously diminished. Lastly, we have Hellfire on. Now you're probably wondering why we haven't gone for Radiation and we've just gone for Heat. And the reason is that we are going to be using a mod on our Vault to provide electric damage to combine with this in order to get Radiation. If you don't have this mod or you don't want to get it, alternatively you could just put on a rank 1 Hellfire and a rank 0 Stormbringer and still have enough capacity with an Orokin Catalyst on to fit the entire build. So on our Vault, we have just added one mod on since our previous look at this. That is Shock Trooper. This essentially is going to allow us to hold down our first ability and apply electric damage to our weapons, which is very, very important. And this is a mod we're actually going to be keeping on basically to the end game. It's going to apply a lot of damage, even with neutral strength. You acquire this mod from syndicates, so if you haven't pledged to the correct syndicate to purchase this mod, you can get it for about 10 to 15 platinum just by trading, so it's not a huge amount of money you need to put into it. Alright guys, so we are now ready for our first Teralyst fight, and the first thing you want to be aware of when you're watching me is that as Vault Prime, I might have a higher energy pool than you if you are running normal Vault. The ways you can counter this and to make sure you keep your energy up nice and high is you can either go to the nearby Grineer camps and kill some Eximus units to get energy from them, or you can invest in some squad energy restores, either medium or large, which you get from syndicates or your clan's dojo. So that's something important to note. But let's just get straight into the fight now with the build we've just looked at and see how we fare. It's important to note that you are going to be getting quite frustrated at the length of time these fights are going to take early on, but stick with it, I promise they will get faster. First thing we're going to do, we're going to come out, use our Vault's second ability to speed us up, get into our Arc Wing and mark where the Eidolon is spawning. There he is. Then we're going to grab ourselves an Eidolon lure, which will spawn at any of the Grineer camps. Like so, and now what we're going to do is try and charge it. So we'll use the same method that we used before when we were hunting for Vomvalysts, because we're going to need 3 Vomvalysts in order to fully charge an Eidolon lure, after which it will be able to tether the Eidolon in place after we take out each of its limbs, meaning we won't have to chase it around the map every time we kill one. So let's just hover around here. There's 2 over there in the forest. Important thing to note, make sure to take out the tethered Vomvalyst first and not the other one. If you take out the other one, it will not go into the lure and it might fly away and be very annoying. To get the third Vomvalyst, we are actually going to come and just attack the Eidolon, as after a while, one will just naturally spawn underneath its feet. In fact, I just heard 2 nearby, so we're not going to do that. We're going to grab these guys. Obviously, you can look around for more if you want, but since we already have some to hand here, we'll go ahead and use them. You will, however, see one spawn underneath his feet as we are attacking it. So let's go ahead and start shooting through our Vault's shield, which is going to improve our crit damage. We're going to aim for the head with our Replac, as it does do more damage, as you can see. Let's move with the Eidolon. Make sure to keep a decent amount of distance between you and it, so that you don't have to put down too many shields. There we go. Now that we've done that, we're going to activate our first ability to get our electric damage. Let's go ahead and take out the locals. And then we can start shooting down the limbs. Now this is going to take a while to begin with, but as our shot combo goes up, we will start dealing more and more damage. There we go. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to put my lure on hold. And I'm going to fly out of the range of the Eidolon's energy spike, and while I'm doing that, I'm actually going to grab another lure, as we have quite a few Vomvalysts that are just hanging around the Eidolon right now, which we can take advantage of. So, back we come, and we are now just going to repeat the process, put down our shield, start using our Replac to headshot the Eidolon until his armor, or his shield, sorry, goes down. There we go. Now let's take out the next limb. I usually start with the arms, as these are generally the harder targets to hit, so if you can get them out early, it will lead to less frustration later on. Let's go ahead and see if we can get some of these Vomvalysts into our other lure, eh? There's quite a few of them knocking about. We do, however, want to get out of the range of this energy spike, so I'm just going to run away this time. And now we're going to do some Vomvalyst control, because we definitely have too many about, and if the Eidolon decides to try and regenerate its shields, these guys are going to be an absolute pain. One other way you can charge your lure is by simply picking up these orbs that Vomvalyst drops and then dashing into the lure. Like so. We now have 2 charged lures, which is all we need to capture an Eidolon Teralyst. So, let's now repeat the process twice more, put up our shield, and start headshotting. So, whoop. Oh, make sure your first ability's up for radiation damage. That's a bit awkward. Let's move ourselves. We've got plenty of energy left, so we should be fine. There we go. I'm going to park one of my lures. I only need one of them attached, so that's fine. And we'll get out of the way again. Happy days. Back we come. So we are once again going to put our shield down. Let's get some higher ground this time, I think. That might make more sense. And continue to headshot the Eidolon. Oh, we've run out of ammo. There we go. Ooh, and radiation damage. Make sure that's up. You can zoom further in as well with your scope to get more damage, but considering the position we're in, it's kind of a bit of a pain. Ah, here we go. Alright. So if the Eidolon does this, you need to make sure you take out all of the Vomvalysts in the area. I'm going to use my amp to do this, as it's a bit easier and I am probably less likely to die completely in my operator. There we go. Yep. We can now take down his shield again. Last limb. There we go. Now what we want to do is probably find ourselves some more energy in the meantime. I'm not really fussed about any of the Vomvalysts coming in to heal him because, frankly, they're just really not going to do much. You can go ahead and kill them and pick up the Sentient cores, however, but yeah, it's not really going to affect you in the long run all that much. Let's go ahead and just grab our last lure here. I just realised I have Mending Soul on as well. That might be a bit of a counter, but again, like I said, focus trees and whatnot, I can't really do much about that, unfortunately. So, Eidolon is now standing up. We're going to get to a decent distance, but we want to make sure that both of our lures are still tethered. Now, this bit is going to take a bit of a while, and it is very likely that you might have to take out some Vomvalysts before you kill the Teralyst, or capture him in this case. As you can see, we are running low on ammo, but I think we should have just enough to do this. And there we go. So you have now captured your first Eidolon Teralyst. That took us about 6 minutes. Could have been quicker. And look at all these lovely cores we have here. And there we go. So when we capture an Eidolon Teralyst, we get a Brilliant Eidolon Shard and a normal Eidolon Shard and an Arcane. So we're going to make sure to grab those now. along with a mod it drops, which, you know, isn't great, but it's fine. At an early game stage as well, you want to be going around and collecting up all the cores that the Eidolon has dropped, as well as the Vomvalyst, as these are obviously going to help you rank up with the quills, so we're going to go ahead and do that now. Whoop, let's grab that. And we'll grab some of these. And we'll get out. And there you go, guys. So you can repeat this process again and again and again. And if we assume it's going to take you about 8 minutes a run, if you do it at the same speed that I just did, then you can get 6 or 7 of these done in a single night cycle. So you should be able to get yourself 6 or 7 Teralyst Arcanes, as well as 6 or 7 brilliant Eidolon shards and 6 or 7 normal Eidolon shards, which is very important for getting us to the next stage of this video. So let's move on. So now that we're able to get our hands on both Eidolon shards and Arcanes, we are able to drastically improve our build and the speed that we can take down our Teralysts. If we take a look at our vault here, there is one particular Arcane that we want to be getting our hands on, which drops from the Teralyst. That is Arcane Nullifier. Arcane Nullifier provides us with plus 102% chance to resist magnetic status effects. Essentially, we are immune to magnetic status effects. For those of you who don't know how these effects work, they basically reduce your energy pool to 0, and the Eidolon's energy spike happens to put out such a status effect. Now, obviously it's not going to negate all the damage that that energy spike does, but there are other ways around that, and when we come to fight the Gantulyst and the Hydrolyst, this is going to be a very important arcane to get, so I would recommend carrying on farming Teralysts until you have a maxed rank nullifier before you move on to fight the Gantulyst and the Hydrolyst. In terms of focus, the shards that we get, both normal and brilliant, are able to be converted into focus. You can see here a brilliant Eidolon shard converts into 25,000, whilst a normal Eidolon shard converts into 2,500. If we were to capture 6 Teralysts in a single night, we could get 150,000 just from the brilliant Eidolon shards alone, and then a bit extra from our Eidolon normal shards. You want to be focusing on Madurai first of all if you are primarily looking to get into Eidolon hunting. The particular skill you want to be focusing on first is going to be Void Strike, closely followed by Power Transfer. Do not bother maxing out Phoenix Talons first, as the additional 30% damage, although nice, is not going to be overly noticeable in the grand scheme of things. You want to be heading straight for Void Strike and maxing this out, as it is going to be able to deal a load of damage both to the Eidolon's shield, and when you come to do the cap shot at the end, you will be able to do it 10 times faster, literally. So this is definitely an important tool to get. In terms of other things on here which are going to help you out, Contamination Wave will also help you deal additional damage to the Eidolon's shield, so this is another important tool, as well as Sling Strength, which will add additional ability strength to your build, thereby giving you, on our vault, more damage from our thirst and more damage through our shield as well, although not on our amp, just on our weapon. Okay guys, so after a while your Madurai skill tree will end up being maxed out, but at the very least you want to max out your Void Strike and Power Transfer, as well as your Contamination Wave, and then you should be able to speed up your fights drastically. So to demonstrate that, I am using exactly the same build, no Arcane Nullifier. We are going to head in using Madurai skill tree maxed out and see how much faster we can do it. Now it's worth noting that I am going to change my start slightly here, as I am going to go for a fully charged lure before I even get over to the Eidolon, as before we were planning on just getting the last Vomvalyst underneath the Eidolon itself. So let's mark our Eidolon, he's over there. We can then grab our lure. And then we'll head back over and see if we can't get ourselves some Eidolon Vomvalysts spawned in. There they are. So once again, shoot the tethered one first. But now, rather than head over, I'm actually going to find a second pair, and to do that, I'm simply just going to hover back over to these rocks. There we go. We only need one this time. There we go. So we've now got a fully charged lure. We can head over to our Eidolon. And now we can make use of our operator's first ability on Madurai, which is Void Strike. And you'll see the shield will go down much faster. So again, will land. I am actually going to activate my radiation damage now, like so. Then we are going to get kind of in a spot where we can shoot him. Oh, but he is turning a lot. Activate our Void Strike. There we go. And the first limb is already down. So once again, we'll hold our lure. And we will head over and find ourselves another lure, which we will eventually get charged. Actually, I believe there's one right next to us, isn't there? Yeah, here it is. Let's hack this one normally. So now we can go ahead and we can use our contamination wave instead. So just like that. And you can see the amount of damage has increased very, very, very much. We are, however, still going to need to deal a decent amount of damage to the limbs with our Rubico, which is going to take us a bit of time. But Madurai providing us with a 30% damage bonus is going to help us out a bit. There we go. Let's grab this Vomvalyst now that he's spawned in. And we'll get out of the way of the energy spike. Now, it's highly likely that our Void Strike might be up again. It is, so we'll go ahead and use that. Shield down. Limb down. Let's go ahead and try and grab these two Vomvalysts. That way our lure will be charged. And for this last limb, once again, we'll just use our contamination wave. Not many crits occurring, it seems. There we go. Alright. Oh, make sure our radiation damage stays up. He's in a very awkward spot at the moment, just causing him to turn around a lot. And there we go. That's the last limb down. So now I'll go ahead and use my Shraks and Scaffold. We can take out some of the Vomvalysts. And we can use this time to go ahead and just pick up some of the Sentient cores that are lying around. If you don't want to take excess damage, you can just wait around in your operator rather than your frame, as your frame's health will slowly tick down if you just remain in your Warframe at this point. So go into operator. You can use void mode if you want. But if you remember now, we can use our Void Strike to deal additional damage here, so let's make sure our first ability is active. We use a shield, hit our first ability on Operator. One more and we should do it. And there we go. 4 minutes and 14 seconds. So we've knocked off at least 3 minutes there from our fight time, just by having Madurai on and having it decently maxed. Let's use our Volt's second ability, grab ourselves the shards and the arcane, and then we'll get ourselves out of here and see what kind of time that came to. So we are out in 4 minutes and 50 seconds, which would kind of suggest that you could maybe do 10 of those in a single night cycle. And if you remember, our brilliant Eidolon shards trading for 25,000 focus, 10 of those in a single night, giving us 250,000 focus a night. Our build and our focus trees are going to exponentially grow on top of whatever other focus we happen to be farming in the game. So now let's move on to improving our build. So as I said earlier, you want to be making sure that you are getting up to rank 5 with Solaris United in order to enter the back room and speak to Little Duck. Little Duck is going to provide us with the parts we need to build our final ever amp for Eidolon hunting. If we take a look at Browse Wares here and scroll down, there are 2 parts that we want to get a hold of, which are the tier 7 parts. You only need to be rank 4 in order to get these, not rank 5. So if you get very tired and bored of ranking up with Little Duck, then just bear that in mind. You just need to get to rank 4 for this. We want to be picking up the Proper Scaffold and the Certus Brace. we are still going to be using the Replac Prism, so we can buy that again from Quill Onco on Cetus. These three parts together are going to form the basis of our amp, which is going to be taking down both the Gantulyst and the Hydrolyst shield in an instant. So alongside farming up the parts for your amp, you are going to want to be upgrading the gear in general across your build. Obviously, you can do this on the fly, and the more gear and stuff you get, the faster you'll be able to do your Teralysts and potentially move into doing Gantulysts prior to getting your next amp. So, what things do we actually need to improve upon? Well, our Vault build for one is something we need to improve on, and I've just thrown together the basic idea of a mid-game Vault build here, with Corrosive Projection, Vigorous Swap to provide us with some serious damage to our primary weapon, and then we've also got just a decent amount of strength here, High Efficiency since we don't yet have something like Arcane Energize, or maybe we don't have access to energy pads, and then a semi-decent amount of duration also. We also want to be getting hold of a better primary, and since now I'm considering that we are moving into the mid-game build, Rubico Prime is the obvious choice. It is a direct upgrade to the Rubico. You can see our crit chance is guaranteed to land a yellow crit now with the same crit multiplier and a higher amount of impact damage. If we take a look, this is the kind of build you want to be aiming for, although strictly speaking, you do not need 5-former to fit this build, and Ambush Optics is more of a quality of life mod which you do not necessarily need to put on, as is Primary Merciless. You do not need this either, it just provides me with a bit of reload speed. The build is based around radiation damage, crit, a bit of attack speed now from Vile Acceleration, as well as multi-shot and just raw damage. With these two things now, we are able to dish out a seriously high amount of damage combined with our Madurai skill tree, but to improve our utility a bit more, I have gone ahead and thrown on the Sarper. The Sarper you can get hold of from the dojo. If you don't have access to the Vastalok, which is another gunblade, this is probably the next best option. We are going to be using Shattering Impact on these weapons in order to strip the Eidolon's armor down, which will allow us to deal a lot more damage to the limbs. A few other bits of gear that you want to be getting hold of during this time as well is going to be Itzal, the Arcwing which you can buy from your clan dojo. If we take a look here, you want to be aiming for mods that are going to improve your flight speed as well as your durability. Itzal's third ability, Cosmic Crush, is very helpful at pulling Vomvalysts towards you and getting your lures charged, so it is a very useful tool to use when hunting Eidolons. The other bit of kit that you might want to get your hands on as well is a Wyrm Prime. Mainly for negate and vacuum, but also it can give you, a bit of extra stuff as well if you wanted to throw primed animal instinct on. My one doesn't even have a reactor on it, so I can only fit a few mods on, so I've got negate, vacuum, regen, guardian, and enhanced vitality. Guardian obviously is going to every now and then boost my shield until my Wyrm dies, which it will when we come to Gantulyst and Hydrolyst. We can also start looking at some additional things to put on our operator, such as arcanes. In terms of arcanes for your amp, I assume at this point you will not have access to an amp arcane adapter. However, if you do, the two amp arcanes that you want to be aiming for are Eternal Onslaught and also Eternal Eradicate. Both of these combined give you the best chance of one-shotting an Eidolon's shield. In terms of your operator, I tend to put Magus Vigor on, as well as Magus Melt or Magus Elevate. One of these will provide you with some decent health regen every time you come in and out of your operator. The same effect can be achieved using Magus Repair as well, which is probably actually better, especially if you're in a squad. The other one is going to provide us with additional heat damage on our amp, which when we come to use our Void Strike can sometimes allow us to simply just one-shot the Eidolon's limb straight through the shield. But if you do not have access to this second arcane, then I would recommend just focusing on Eternal Onslaught only on the amp, as this one is going to guarantee us a critical hit on our amp, which is now a 177. If we take a look at the parts, just to double back on ourselves to make sure you're aware, we are using now a Replac Prism, a Certus Brace, and a Proper Scaffold. So after gathering up all of these new items and gear, there are also a few mechanics which you want to learn at this point before moving on to the Gantulyst and the Hydrolyst, and we're going to run through these in turn. Okay guys, so I have a few guides on my channel that cover these little tactics in a bit more detail, so if you want to know more about them, you can go and have a look at those in my Eidolon guide playlist. However, we want to keep this video at least a bit concise, so we're just going to run through them very briefly here to explain what we're going to be doing in our new hunt sequence. So, first of all, we're using a new amp with Proper. The timing on our amp is going to be as follows. We are going to fire 2 Proper shots through our shield, followed by a Replac as soon as the Eidolon's shield comes back up. If you want to learn more about timing, I do have a slow motion guide in my playlist, as I just said, so you can go and have a look at it there. The second thing you need to know about is pre-shielding. Now that we are coming up against the Gantulyst and the Hydrolyst, we want to have some shields positioned in the exact locations where they are going to spawn, so that we can fly and land behind the shield and simply use our Replac to instantly take down the shield wherever the Eidolon happens to spawn. The first spot where an Eidolon can spawn is called Close Right, and it's located somewhere around here. We have this little furrow on the left hand side where I usually like to place my shield, just about here, looking slightly downwards into the water. The second spot is Close Left spawn. That's marked by this little outcrop of land on the left hand side if you were to look at it from the shrine. So we're going to place our shield here. The third spot is called Mid spawn. That's over here. We can go ahead and place our shield looking this way. And the last spot is the dreaded long spawn. Now long spawn, the Eidolon will spawn underground and gradually make its way out, which means that there is going to be a delay before we can shoot the limb. That being said, you can still take down the shield underground if you were to place your Vault shield facing into the floor here and using your Replac to detonate off of the rock. It's not really worth it if you don't have the Zenith to shoot through the floor, but if you wanted to, you could do it. Generally speaking, with the Rubico, I would just stand a bit further back to the left-hand side of this rock, place my shield here, and then use my Replac to take down the shield, following which I would simply just shoot the limb afterwards. So the next tactic you might want to use is a basic Eidolon lure fast charge. Now, there is a video on my channel describing how you can do this, both the way I'm about to show now and the faster way, which is the more advanced tactic. But essentially, we are just going to fly over towards East Camp, which is to our right, and we're going to pick up 2 Vomvalysts there, after which we are then going to head over to the Eidolon and pick up a third one at the Eidolon itself. So there's our first 2. We can then head over, make sure to strip the Eidolon's armor before he comes out, like so. 2 shots should be just fine with a full shattering impact. And then if you are to wait, we can just do a bit of damage here. You can see a third Vomvalyst will spawn underneath him relatively quickly, and within 30 or 40 seconds we will have ourselves a charged lure. The next thing you're going to want to master in Eidolon hunting is your lure management. So I've parked my first lure right over by the Eidolon here, and I'm going to go ahead and take out the shield. Whoop. There we go. After which I'm going to go ahead and grab myself one more lure. You can get 2 at this point, but to avoid stress we're just going to grab the 1. You can also use ciphers to save yourself a better time. Once again, we've taken out the limb. I'm going to go and grab another lure. And fly back. This is the last lure we're going to need for this particular part. And as soon as we take out the Eidolon's last limb here, I'm going to bring my lures underneath. Oh. And make sure to pick up any Vomvalysts that spawn underneath it. You can do this with your weapon or with your amp. The last one, it might be easier to use your Proper to detonate the Vomvalyst inside. I'm then going to park this yellow lure by the Eidolon so that it picks up any of the Vomvalysts that spawn when he stands up. Now we can go ahead and start gathering up some more lures. You can gather up all of the lures that you need at this section if you are quick enough. However, at the bare minimum, you probably want to collect 3, as this will allow you enough lures to get over to the Hydrolyst and tether him as well. There's our 3. Let's come back. We'll wait so that he stands up and we can actually shoot these guys. And there we go. We can then pick up the rest of the Vomvalysts over here if we so desire. Now at this point it is worth noting that you can do a few more things with your lures. The first one to note is that you can teleport the lures away from the Eidolon after you have captured him. Once you've hit the headshot, if you want to move the lure to a different location so you can pick up the loot elsewhere, you simply fly over to that area and wait. So for example, if you wanted to pick up your loot on the shrine, as soon as you've captured the Eidolon, you can bring the lure over and it will teleport still connected to the Eidolon and drop the loot elsewhere. So that's pretty much all you need to know in regards to lure control and lure management. However, when we come to do the Hydrolyst fight, obviously, we are going to need 2 more lures, as at this point, we are going to be wanting 6 total. 2 for the Teralyst, which we've just blown up and got the loot from, 3 for the Gantulyst, and 3 for the Hydrolyst. So, now that we've gone through all of that, let us see if we can do a full Eidolon hunt. So that's a Teralyst, a Gantulyst, and a Hydrolyst, capturing each of them with the build that we have just shown off, which we are going to dub the mid-game build. Okay guys, so this is going to be an uncommentated run. I'm just going to go ahead and do this. However, there is one thing that I do want to mention before I go in, which I forgot to mention earlier, and that is that in order to proc Eternal Onslaught on your operator to guarantee yourself a critical hit with your amp, make sure that you are draining your operator's energy pool either through dashing down into the floor or using your second ability on Madurai in order to drain your energy pool to proc Eternal Onslaught, which will guarantee you a crit using your amp. That's the only thing I want to note. Let's hop into it and see if we can get this run down. So our mid-game build here, able to carry us through potentially up to 5 Hydrolysts in a single night cycle. You saw at the end our time being under 10 minutes and a night cycle lasting 50 minutes, we should be able to get 5 done. However, even if you can only get 3 or 4 done, you will still be making more focus and you will be gaining better arcanes than if you were to just stick to Teralysts at this point. If we take a look at our skill tree and go to focus conversion, you can see that Radiant Shards trade in for 40,000, and we get 2 of these per hunt, never mind per night. So if we manage to do 5 Hydrolysts in a night, then we are going to be getting 10 of these, which is 400,000 focus a night. Not even to mention we're going to get 3 Brilliant Eidolon Shards per hunt as well, so that's going to be a further 15 times 25,000, which I'm not going to do in my head right now, but I believe it's at just above 300k. So you are getting, you know, upwards of 700,000 focus now per night, and you should be able to cap out your skill trees very, very quickly and start unbinding some of these other bits and bobs in the other focus groups. Now, what I want to point out as well, again, you might have seen me use some tactics in that video that you're perhaps unaware of, and I will reiterate that I do go into detail on a lot of these things in my Eidolon Guides playlist, so I will leave a link down in the description below to that if you want to go and check it out. So now that we're able to do 5 Hydrolysts in one night, the only thing that remains is to try and work our way up to that final 6th Hydrolyst. 6 is the maximum number of Hydrolysts you can currently capture in a single night cycle in the game at the moment. And there are a few bits of gear that you can collect up in order to get to that point. Now, I am not going to do an intermediary build between the mid-game and the end-game because obviously I already have all of the end-game stuff. Rather, what I am going to do is I am just going to talk through some of the gear that you can collect to make your life a bit easier. But that being said, you do not need everything that I'm about to tell you in order to get that 6th Hydrolyst. At some point, you will find that you have enough to take out the 6th Hydrolyst. My build is obviously completely kitted to the max, and it makes it very, very comfortable for me to do 6 Hydrolysts pretty much guaranteed. So without further ado, let's just run through all of the gear now that you want to be looking to collect in order to get to that endgame Eidolon hunting build. So first of all, you want to be kitting out your operator fully with all of the arcanes that are necessary for the 6 cap. I would recommend getting Eternal Onslaught and Eternal Eradicate now in order to seriously boost your amp damage output, as well as maybe Magus Elevate and Magus Melt on your operator. However, please feel free to put on whatever you are most comfortable with here. I like Magus Elevate as it allows me to heal my Warframe very quickly, and Magus Melt every now and then will give me the opportunity to insta-hit a limb through the shield with my amp and kill it. Next, you probably want to try and acquire an on-call crewmate. In order to get this, you need to be at rank 9 with command on your Railjack intrinsics. This will allow you to call in a crewmate for 3 minutes as a Spectre to help you out in the fight. You can utilize your on-call crewmate with a chaining beam weapon, such as the Tenet Cycron or the Kuvan to hit Vomvalysts that spawn underneath the Eidolon, thereby charging lures for you. This all comes into the role of lure management, and it will seriously reduce your stress when you are hunting Eidolons. Next up, you probably want to get hold of the Vastalok. This is a much more user-friendly gunblade, and it is able to strip the Eidolon's armor much faster than the Sarpa does, and it will also improve your swap speed from operator to Warframe. This is the kind of build that you want to be going for. 2 shots with a max rank shattering impact, or 3 with a rank 3 shattering impact should do the trick just fine. The next step you want to take is maxing out your vault as best as you can. The first thing you might want to look at is maybe trying to put some Archon shards on your build. You can see here I have full Tau Forged, but this is really not necessary, and if you just have normal shards, that is absolutely fine. I tend to go with 3 on ability strength, 1 on casting speed, and 1 on armor. So when it comes to our mods and general vault build, the first thing you want to consider changing will be your 4th ability. You want to put on a damage-based ability using your Helminth. My personal favourite is Eclipse, however several others work, such as Roar or Smite from Oberon using Smite Infusion. However, that last one you will have to sub out a mod on the build in order to fit the augment on. Otherwise, our mods are now basically geared towards a high level of strength and a decent amount of duration. You can see here I've also applied some Umbral Former in order to fit all 3 of the Umbral mods on. You could get away with just having 1 Umbral Former and having 2 Umbral mods on. The reason I have put all 3 on is because this allows me to get up to near 50% Tau resistance, which is what Eidolon's class has, so my tankiness is increased massively. Not to mention, I am getting the huge benefit of 77% ability strength on Umbral Intensify, as well as a seriously decent amount of armor from Umbral Fiber maxed out. In terms of my arcanes, you can see here I have applied Arcane Precision alongside Arcane Nullifier. We will talk about this in a second when we get to the secondary weapon, but if this is not something that you are preferable to, you could swap this out for something like Guardian or Energize or any other arcane that you might want to put on there that you feel would benefit you. So now we move on to our primary weapon. My personal preference is the Zenith, however I get asked by players a lot what weapon they should use, and at the end of the day, it is whatever weapon you feel most comfortable using. I have used the Zenith so much that I feel very uncomfortable using other weaponry now, and the reason that I like to use it is because of its passive ability that allows it to shoot infinitely through walls. This allows me to hit limbs through the floor on long spawn. If you remember before, we were using our Replac and waiting for the Eidolon to come out of the water. With the Zenith, we can simply probe her into the floor, take out the shield, and then shoot the limb through the floor with it, which is why I like to use it. It saves me a few seconds every run, but it's not strictly speaking necessary. I also happen to have a very good rhythm for this, which is something you might want to consider getting for any weapon that you're using to take on Eidolons. You can see here this build, again, is geared entirely towards crit chance, multi-shot, and crit damage. That is basically all we are working with on all of these. I've also got primary deadhead on, which is going to give me a plus 30% to headshot multiplier, but more importantly give me a negative 50% recoil reduction, which is actually very good for the Zenith. You can also put mods onto your Parazon just to help you with quality of life. The two mods that I would highly recommend getting hold of are Runtime and Untraceable. One provides you with invisibility, the other provides you with greatly increased speed in your Arcwing. If you are someone who likes to avoid using ciphers, then I would also recommend getting Auto Breach, as obviously this gives you a chance to hack the lure automatically. The last thing that we want to talk about for this build is going to be the Vermisplicer, our secondary weapon, which is actually going to be replacing a lot of what we were doing with our primary weapon beforehand, including all of the limbs of the Teralyst and both of the cap shots on the Gantulyst and the Hydrolyst. These weapons have incredibly high fire rates, and you can use them to instant kill the limbs as soon as the shield goes down, as well as get the instant cap shots on the Gantulyst and the Hydrolyst, which, although it doesn't save you a whole load of time, a couple of seconds each run might make it a bit easier for you to obviously get that 6 cap, and if you are looking for the incredibly fast times, then you are going to need something like this. Not necessarily the Vermisplicer, the Nell Prime also works well as well. If you are interested in the parts that I have on this amp, you can see them here. Chamber Vermisplicer, Loader Splat, and Grip Gibber. These are personal preference. I prefer a bit of range over the maximum damage, and I do have a Riven mod on my build already, which is pretty damn good. It gives me crit damage, fire rate, and multi-shot. Generally considered to be kind of the top 3 stats for hunting Eidolons with on the Vermisplicer. The negative impact, not so much, but to be honest, it's not going to affect me too much as it's already an insane amount of damage going into this build. So really the last thing that you want to be probably focusing on for the endgame build is going to be your Railjack intrinsics and also your Duviri intrinsics as well now. So on Railjack, if you come over to the tactical and piloting skill trees, probably the two most important things here are going to be the rank 8 on tactical, which allows you to reduce the blink cooldown on your Arcwing, as well as the rank 8 on piloting, which is going to increase our Arcwing speed by 20%. The other two here do provide you with a bit of extra, health and shields, as well as a bit of range, which can help in gathering up Vomvalysts, but they're not strictly speaking necessary, and they won't help you out all that much compared to these two over here. As for Duviri intrinsics, you can see here at rank 9, our Drifter deals plus 25% damage, and in the Origin system, both Drifter and Operator receive this boost. This is obviously going to help us to take down the shield more consistently and generally faster on the Eidolons. If you wanted to increase your damage even further on your Operator, and you are level 30 or above, you can come to any relay and come to the shrine in the center and give yourself a damage blessing, which will give you plus 25% damage, and that covers everything including your Operator. If you're not level 30, then you could still come to a relay a bit before nighttime, usually 10 to 20 minutes beforehand, and you will see that there are probably going to be quite a few Eidolon hunters scattered about. Generally, they will share buffs between themselves, so you're more than likely to be able to pick one up if you do sit in a relay before an Eidolon night cycle. So that pretty much covers it, guys. We have now reached our end game build with all of those different bits of gear and our intrinsics now complete. We can now do a very fast Eidolon hunt indeed. So before we end the video, we are just going to do one run using our end game build to see what time we can get and to prove that it is very, very, very easy to be able to get 6 caps using this build. Now, I will reiterate what I said earlier on. I have guides for pretty much all of the mechanics and structure that you're about to see during this hunt, and I will leave a link down to my Eidolon guide playlist in the description below, so go and have a look at that before you start wondering what the hell's going on. If you do have any questions though, as always, please leave them down in the comments below. I will be happy to answer any of them. Being a very experienced Eidolon hunter over the last 10 years, whilst the game has been evolving, obviously Eidolons haven't been around that long, I like to think that I have at least some standing still when it comes to Eidolon hunts. So do leave your questions, comments, whatever down below for me to answer. But without further ado, guys, let's just get into this final run now and see how we do. Alright guys, so not the cleanest of runs there, but a double long spawn, allowing us to show off the power of the Zenith there, getting our last Hydrolyst limb time down to about 7 minutes or so. That overall night run time was about 6:58. We were actually on the last run of the night just then. That was a 6 cap, and you could see there we were very, very comfortably handling that. It was a night cap at the end of it, and by night cap we mean you're able to do all 6 Hydrolysts before the sun even comes up. You can do 6 Hydrolysts even if the sun comes up just after you spawn the last Hydrolyst if you know how to walk the Eidolon properly, and there are videos out there on how you can do that. But guys, before I sign off this video, there's one more thing that I would like to insert here, and that is that Eidolon hunts can be affected by your hardware. Obviously, you're loading in and out of the planes every time you've completed a Hydrolyst run, so that loading time will be influenced by what kind of gear you have. It will be influenced by whether or not you are on console or PC, so do bear that in mind. My loading times on PC using a solid state drive tend to be between 13 and 17 seconds getting in and out. They can be much, much longer if you are running off of a hard drive or you have a very slow CPU. So do bear that in mind when you come to do this. If you are getting frustrated with your load times and that is what is causing you issues getting your 6 Hydrolysts, maybe look into some better hardware. But obviously, that's going to come down to budgets and not everyone can afford that. So do whatever suits you best. But we will round out the video there, guys. Hopefully this has been informative. I've been kind of wanting to make a longer Eidolon hunting guide for a while now. And once again, my playlist will be down in the description below. I'll leave a link to that down there, and that will show you a bit more in-depth knowledge of, you know, some of the more specific tactics that we employ when we do Eidolon hunting. But yeah, otherwise, guys, if you have any questions, leave them down below. If you have any comments, leave them down below. Otherwise, if you did enjoy the video, please leave a like and subscribe, and I will catch you in the next one, guys.